Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Shanka Show, the place where you can always learn something new about life in the Soviet Union. Жизнь в Советском Союзе. In today's video, I would like to show you the coolest runabout in my hometown of Kiev, and maybe even the coolest runabout in the entire Soviet Union. And considering the fact that it was built back in 1970, it was probably the coolest runabout in the whole world. This video was filmed in 1976, and what's great about it, it shows not only a runabout, it also shows several other places that I told you about in my other video. And this place, called Nikolskaya Borщagivka, became my stamping grounds in 1980s and 90s because my family moved into the area in 1980. And here's the great aerial view of that runabout. The picture was taken, by the way, in 1984, and we entered the runabout from the right, and we continued straight. So basically we took the second exit. And here's a slightly different angle of the same runabout. And if you look around, Nikolskaya Borщagovka was developed in 1970s as one big project. It was designed to house 120,000 people, and along with the roads and houses, they also built stores, movie theaters, and parks. And here's the closer view. So as you see, the uniqueness of this runabout, it handles three types of traffic: vehicles, trams, and pedestrians. You have your normal runabout like in Europe, and now it's become more popular in America. So the main traffic is a circle and you have to slow down when you merge. In the middle you have two tram lines merging or splitting depending which way you go. So I came from the left. It's a tram line number 1 coming from South Borщagivka. So line number 1 will merge with line number 3, and then it continues towards downtown Kiev, so that's coming to the right. And then we have pedestrians who can enter the runabout using underpasses from 4 different directions, and then they can safely cross the tram lines using that 3-legged bridge. And then they have, they can go to the supermarket or movie theater. We'll talk about them in a minute. To the left, it's park, so that was like the lowest traffic going that way. And 2 exits on the right front, and on the right far end, that's usually people came from their apartment building. I'm not sure if you noticed, but there's hardly any cars on the road. And it's not some small sleepy town, right? It's Kiev, the capital of Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic, with population around 3 million people. And still, there's hardly any traffic. The traffic jams were literally unknown in the Soviet Union. The streets were always empty like this. So here's entering the runabout back in 1976. All you could see on the road is just one minivan in front of you, and that's probably RAF van from Latvia. I made a video about it. And this is the same spot in modern day Ukraine, so about 50 years later. Trees got way bigger. You got advertising banners. And look how many cars on the road. And now let's talk about places of interest that surround this runabout. And I wonder if any of you recognize this specific building right here. This is the Universam. Universam. Универсальный магазин самообслуживания. And here's the better photo of the same place. So Universam was the Soviet version of what Americans call grocery supermarket. And if you want more details about Soviet Universams, I already have a video on this topic, and link will be below in the comment section. And here's the picture inside of the Universam. So similar concept, just shelves full of goods. So instead of your traditional deli style grocery store, which most Soviet stores used to be, Universam allows you to pick your own items. Large bags or backpacks were not allowed into Universam. In exchange, people will get a little basket. We had no shopping carts, just the basket. And if you want to explore Soviet-era Universam from inside, I also have a video on that topic. A link will be also below in the comment section. Fun fact, this ultra-modern building of Universam in Kiev was designed by Soviet-era architect Mikhail Budilkovsky, who in the early 1980s moved to Chicago and became a successful American architect. But let's take a look at this photo again. Did you guys notice anything unusual? And I mean unusual for any viewers who grew up in the United States or Western Europe or any other capitalist country. Okay, let me help you. So this is the entrance to Universam, and you see quite a crowd of people. And here's the parking. So let's zoom it up. This large grocery supermarket has parking area for about 10 cars. So this is the Soviet Union in a nutshell. It was extremely unfriendly to the cars and extremely friendly to pedestrians. And once again, let's compare how the Soviet Universam used to look back in 1970s and 80s. And this is how this building looks right now. So it's not called Universam anymore for quite a long time. It's the grocery supermarket called Velika Kishenya, a big pocket. And as you see, there's a lot of advertising and there's a parking for cars where people used to walk. And here's a little bit better aerial view. This photo probably was taken in the late 1990s. As you see, now we have a parking lot. It's almost like Soviet architects knew that one day this giant empty area will be needed for cars. So once again, this is the socialist Ukraine in 1980s. Hundreds of people walking, 2 trucks and 1 car. That's all you could see. And here's the modern day Ukraine. A lot of cars, not many people, and a lot of advertising and additional retail outfits everywhere. Okay, but we need to move along, and our next place of interest is this building, Movie Theater Leipzig. Hoop, there it is! So this is Kinotheater Leipzig, Movie Theater Leipzig. This is where I watched most movies while I used to live in the Soviet Ukraine. And yes, I already made the video about Soviet movie theaters, and link will be once again in the comment section. Don't forget to check it out. And if you're wondering why would the movie theater in the capital of Soviet Ukraine call Leipzig the name of the German city, it's because Leipzig and Kiev were so-called Goroda Побратимы, or they called in English sister cities. In these aerial pictures, you kind of see that this movie theater consisted of 2 cinema halls. One is a large one, the main one. This is where the roof kind of slopes up. So the opposite side was the large screen, and then there was a small cinema hall, which were usually where the children movies were shown. And all I want to say right now about Soviet movie theaters, I want you to think about the numbers. So this area, Nikolskaya Borщagovka, was a place for 120,000 people and had a single movie theater. I'm not sure how that formula works in the United States, but most of the times it was hard to get tickets. You had to be in a long line to buy tickets, and movie theaters was always packed, especially when they showed American movies. Okay, so we talked a little bit about cars, we talked a little bit about people, and now let's talk a little bit about public transportation. As I mentioned earlier, this runabout also served as a junction for 2 tram lines, and we called them Skоростной tramvai, high-speed tramway. So line number 1 was coming from my area, South Borщagovka, and here it joined together with line number 3, and they both went downtown Kiev, which on this picture to the right. And here's that tramway stop. It was called Ostanovka Gnata Yury, the tram stop of Gnata Yury. And that's a hilarious part. I never knew or never bothered to find out who the heck the Gnat Yura was. But of course now with modern technologies it takes 2 seconds to find out on Google that Gnat Yura was a Soviet and Ukrainian director and a theater and movie actor. He was born in 1888, died in 1966, so he was lucky. He actually survived through the Stalin era. He made several movies, including Prometheus in 1936, Shores in 1939, Taras Shevchenko in 1951, and The Unforgettable Year 1919 in 1952. By the way, on these pictures of Gnata Yury tram station, you see Soviet-made trams. They were old models that were replaced by the time I moved into the area. And this is the trams I remember. Those were Škodas made in Czechoslovakia, really fast and really comfortable. Well, somewhat comfortable. And on this photo taken sometimes around 1986 or 87, you could see tram number 1 splitting away from the number 3 line and heading towards Yuzhная Borщagovka, the area where I lived. And since the photo was taken around 1986, there is a slight chance I was inside of that tram. The cost of the tram ticket was 5 kopecks, as you see at this picture, and its actual ticket says Shvidkisny tramvai, so it's in Ukrainian speed train. So let's talk about speed train. So back in the day, tram cars used to share the road with pedestrians, cars, and even horses. By the way, this cool picture was taken downtown Berrien Springs, Michigan, the town that I live in. We used to have a tram line going from South Bend, Indiana, through Berrien Springs to St. Joe on the Lake Michigan. And while in the United States, trams virtually disappeared by the end of 1930s, being replaced by cars, in Soviet Union, trams remained in service all the way till 80s and 90s, and they still in service today. So this is the tram line number 1, and this photo was taken sometimes in the middle of 1980s. This is close to downtown Kiev, and as you see, that's just a normal tram line, and you share the road with cars and pedestrians. So the idea of a high-speed tram or скоростной tramway was to have a dedicated fenced-in line just for trams, so there'll be no cars crossing or people, and this way you can spread the stops and have trams moving way faster. And there's another great aerial view of our runabout, and you could see high-speed tram lines right there in the middle. And while we're on the topic of Soviet public transportation, let's talk about buses. On this photo on the right, you see 3 buses. The yellow one is most likely it's number 89. That's the one I took a lot going from my area in South Borщagovka to the subway station Svetoshina. And I have a good story about this bus. So recently I made a video about special cake made in Kiev. It was called Kievsky Tort, and someone mentioned that was probably a challenge to bring cake like that home using public transportation, especially during the rush hour. So this occurred on the New Year Eve. I was on a packed bus coming home, and when we stopped by the Universam, so there was a bus stop there, among other people, this guy climbed in and he had a cake in his hand. So he was the last one to climb on the bus, and he kind of placed himself protecting his cake with his body, so the cake was between him and the door. And when the bus started going around the runabout, driver was driving just a little bit too fast, and the momentum shifted everyone on the bus towards the door. And this poor bastard, he was like screaming, begging, but no one could help it. And so he got slowly squished into his cake and into the door, and that whole box broke, cake fell out. It was all over his chest. He was so mad, so he left on the next bus stop. And I want to say a couple of words about these apartment buildings. You see the tall 16-story high apartments. Those were the tallest apartment buildings built in the Soviet Union. As I mentioned, 16-story height, and that was the Brezhnev era. So during Nikita Khrushchev, we had Khrushchevki. Those were 5-story high. You kind of see them on the left from the tall apartment buildings. And the front is a 5-story high Khrushchevka, and behind it is the long 9-story high Brezhnevka, and then 16-story high, that was the tallest. I'm planning to make a separate video, but to the left, it's a 5-story high Khrushchevka once again. It had no elevators. Then behind the Khrushchevka and also to the far right, there's an extra long 9-story apartment building. This is Brezhnevka. They had a single elevator, and 16-story high Brezhnevka's apartments had 2 elevators. One was large, like a cargo style. So this is the difference. No elevators in Khrushchevkas, 1 in a 9-story high apartment buildings and 2 in 16-story high. And also wanted to show you this photo. So this is early 1970s. This is the beginning of construction of that runabout and surrounding area. Okay, my friends, I hope you enjoyed this video about the coolest runabout in my hometown of Kiev, or maybe entire the Soviet Union. You can always support my work with your likes, with your comments, with your tips, and we'll talk to you soon. До побачення. Goodbye.